Again, this is another debut novel. It just made me think of Boris Johnson. My brain just went, I just don't find any of the characters likeable. In fact, I'd go as far as to say they're all arseholes. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Gemma and today we're going to be taking a look at my June reads. So let's dive straight in. The first book that I read was Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow. This is her debut novel and I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed this story. I do think it could do with a trigger warning because it does deal with domestic violence and sexual assault of a child. Now this story follows 3 generations of black women from the same family and it is set in Memphis. So we follow Hazel from the 1930s onwards. Hazel finds a fantastic man who falls desperately in love with her, wants to build her a house and protect her and take care of her, and honestly they have the type of love that we all dream about. Her husband becomes one of the first black police officers. During that time period that was a really tough job to do, and spoiler alert, so we see Hazel going through the trauma of her husband being lynched. Hazel has 2 daughters, Miriam and August, and we follow their stories too. Miriam marries a guy who is in the military, who seems perfect to begin with, but very quickly that love turns into violence, and we have domestic violence in that relationship. Together they have 2 daughters, Joan and Maya, and Joan is really the focus of the story out of the 2 of those. So Miriam, after being beaten up again by her husband, decides to take the girls and she heads back to her ancestral home where her sister is now living. And her sister August is a single mum to Derek, and Derek is a wayward teenager, a tearaway. He's involved with gangs and everything that you would think would come with that. Now what we learn is that a harrowing incident took place between Derek and Joan when Joan was about 3 years old, and this is where the trigger warnings come in because she was a victim of sexual assault by her cousin. At the time he was also a child himself. So we end up in a situation where every single generation has faced trauma and they're thrown together into this house, and we see this web of family ties and generational trauma and these strong women trying to navigate their way through and do what's best for their children. Each chapter goes to a different character, so we get to see things from different points of view. And it was just a story of incredible strength and resilience, so I would highly recommend this one. I give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. Following on from the strong women theme, the next book I read was Wayward by Amelia Hart. Again, this is another debut novel, and I really like this book. So this has a more of a witchy theme to it, but it's not like a Harry Potter out of this world. It's more of a realism magic. So this story follows, again, it's 3 women from different generations. They are much more spread out in this book. So we have Alpha in the 1600s, then we have Violet in the 1940s, and then we have Kate in the modern day. The theme across this book is that all of these women, and they all live, even though they're from the same family, they are all in different kind of socio-economic situations. And it doesn't matter which one they're in, they are all treated terribly by the men around them, by the men that are either in their community or the men that are part of their family. Again, we deal with assault in this story, so trigger warning if that is something that you might want to pass on. So all 3 of these women have this natural connection to nature, and that's beautifully woven into the story. So Althea in the 1600s is accused of being a witch, so we follow her story when she goes to trial and the outcome of that. Then we have Violet, whose mother has married into aristocracy. She's living in this beautiful big house, but she's completely shut away. She's not allowed to go out into the village. So although she seems to be living this complete life of privilege, she's very much like a bird locked in a cage. While her brother gets to go off to study and learn new things, she is told girls don't need to be educated and she needs to learn how to sew and do those kinds of things. But she's incredibly intelligent, and she sneakily gets her brother's books and teaches herself about insects and birds and nature. And then we have Kate, who is living in London in an abusive marriage. She's been completely cut off from everybody else because her husband is very controlling. He doesn't like her talking to other people. He's incredibly jealous of her. And then one day she decides that she has to flee after being attacked by him once again. And all of these characters end up in this one rickety little cottage set in the north of England called Wayward Cottage. And the cottage hides all the secrets from the previous generations, and we see how they're all linked and intertwined. If you're into books with a witchy theme and strong female leads, this is definitely worth a read. So I give this book 4 out of 5. Now, the next book that I read was The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and I loved this story. I'm going to say it straight away, this was a 5-star read for me. So this is a dark academia book. We follow Richard, who's the narrator, and he ends up going, he's from quite a working class background, not a lot of money, and ends up going to this kind of preppy college in New England, where he ends up studying classics. So there's a lot of ancient Greek and there's a lot of Latin in there, with a handful of select students. There are only 5 students in the class when he joins, and the teacher that teaches this class is very reluctant in the beginning to let Richard join. What we find out about the students that are in it is they are an eccentric bunch. They all come from incredible privilege, incredible amounts of wealth within their family, and the way that they hold themselves and present themselves very much kind of shows that that's the upbringing that they have had. Spoiler if you want to read this and you don't want to know. Now, what we find out really early on is that one of the group, so the 5 originals and Richard, is killed by the other members of the group. And so the book takes us through why that happened, who did it, who was the instigator. It is very intelligently written. The author, Donna Tartt, you can tell must have done a ton of research into ancient Greek and Latin, because it's very, very heavy on that. But I think that's what makes the book so fantastic to read, is that the research has been so impeccably done. Students, they are an odd bunch for sure. One of the things that I found a little bit distracting, and this is just me, was that the character Bunny, I couldn't get past the fact that every time he was described, or every time he spoke, or every time he was involved in something, the way he treated other people, it just made me think of Boris Johnson. So the entire way through, the character of Bunny was Boris Johnson. And if you've read it, and that makes sense to you, please drop me a comment and let me know, because I just couldn't shake that image of him. As for the rest of the students, none of them are really likable. They all wear their privilege and their intelligence almost like an armour. But what you find is the further through the book you get, you start to see these chinks in their armour, and they start to break down, and things get crazier and crazier. And I think it's the fact that they grew up probably with very little rules. They grew up in this, like I say, incredible privilege, that things go as far as what they did. So yeah, really fantastic read. Towards the end, I couldn't devour it quick enough. I just wanted to know what was going on, what was happening, and the ending was very satisfying. So this is my first 5-star read of 2023. Last but not least, I read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I struggled with this book. I don't know whether it's because this copy that I have is like what you would get from your GCSEs, and so my brain just went. Now, I remember watching this many, many years ago, whether it was a film or a TV series or something, so I knew vaguely what the story was about. And of course, it's a classic book. But when it came to actually reading, I found myself really having to force myself to keep going with it. Halfway through, I switched from reading the physical copy to listening to the audiobook, and actually I enjoyed the second half much more. I was sitting making homemade hash browns, peeling potatoes whilst listening to this, and that was actually much better for me. One of the things about Wuthering Heights is I just don't find any of the characters likeable. In fact, I'd go as far as to say they're all arseholes. It wasn't my favourite. I think I'm much more of a Jane Austen woman than an Emily Bronte, so I gave this a 3 stars. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.